Good evening. Thank you all for being here in the midst of these globally trying times. My name is Scout Meredith Best, and I am a Clarke Forum Student Project Manager. On behalf of the Clarke Forum for Contemporary Issues at Dickinson College, I would like to welcome you to tonight's event, providing safe shelter when home is not a haven from crisis. Allow me to introduce our panelist. Jason Brode is the Executive Director of DICON Youth Services. He is also a co-facilitator and creative partner for Dickinson College's Healthy Masculinity Initiative and a co-facilitator of the AMEND program of the Domestic Violence Services of Cumberland and Perry Counties. Sonya Browne is the shelter supervisor of the Domestic Violence Services of Cumberland and Perry Counties and works to alleviate the struggles of those impacted by poverty, violence, and racism. Colleen Kinney is the program director of the Sexual Assault Rape Crisis Program of Services of Cumberland County, a program of the Ywca Carlisle. She is also a speaker with the Resilient Voices program with the Office of Victim Advocate and uses her survivor's perspective to address domestic violence and sexual assault. Scott Shewell is the president and CEO of Safe Harbour, which provides supportive services to those in need of a home. Any questions you may have for panelists can be posed using the chat feature on YouTube. Contact information for the organizations that tonight's panelists represent is available at clarke.dickinson.edu. Also there on our website for the Dickinson community, we have information from our Title IX office, whose resources continue to be available. Thank you for attending. We will now begin this presentation.
Colleen, would you like to start and maybe just introduce yourself and introduce what you do at the YWCA?
Sure. Hi, my name is Colleen Kinney. I'm the program director at the YWCA in Carlisle. We have the Sexual Assault Rape Crisis Program for the county. So we are the county's local rape crisis program and main provider of those services. We have free and confidential services to anybody in the community, any age, gender, anyone can come and get services from us. We are still up and running. We're running virtually right now, so we're still using the hotline as the main contact for us. We provide counseling services, prevention education in the communities. We attend any forensic rape kits that are in that come into any of the local hospitals, as well as work with a lot of the other teams in the county to create protocols surrounding the issues that we're involved in. Currently right now, dealing with the COVID-19, as everyone else has, we've switched to a lot of online services. So we've found how much we have not been technologically savvy in the past, and we're working on being able to reach survivors in the community a little bit better via phone, virtual counseling, social media, and anywhere else in the community we can try to get in right now while it's safe. We continue to work with our local coalitions to work with any legislation that comes through. Right now we're seeing a lot of issues surrounding the prison, the release of prisoners. So we're working with our local coalitions to try to advocate what best we can for survivors who may be affected by anyone who would be released. We've seen a lot of increase in sexual violence protection orders. Since the courthouse is still up and running for essential services, we are still able to provide those to the community. And we've also seen an increase in general hotline calls. It has been difficult, I would say, to keep people engaged in counseling over the phone, just because have so much other stress going on right now. There's a lot of anxiety dealing with everything else that you're dealing with while you're at home. But we continue to try to provide those services best we can. We've very much ramped up our social media presence in order to hope that there's some way for people to reach us via that way. And then again, we're also continuing just to work with our local community to make sure that children are being seen who need to be seen, I would say we haven't seen a big change in mandated reporting on our side, or even working with kids in the community. All the other services are pretty steady since this has happened, but we definitely have begun to get contact about people worrying about having their kids home, you know, having other people in the community, you know, just the general fears, I guess you would say, of what's been going on. And a lot of it has been connected to people's past trauma. You know, people are sitting at home kind of feeling stuck sometimes, and that just tends to exacerbate a lot of feelings that people are having. So we just wanted to get it out there. No, we're still around. We're still here to serve you. The hospitals are still open. Part of our plans for reaching out to the community is to make people aware that they still can get services. The biggest thing that we've worried about was people not going to get forensic rape kits because of the hospitals and the fear of being sick. Those services are all still open. We're just trying to remind people, take care of yourself. We're there to assist in any way we can if you need those services as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sonya, can you hear us?
I can.
Great. Would you like to go next and just introduce yourself and your organization and tell us a little bit about the situation that you're experiencing currently?
Okay, I'm Sonya Browne and I'm the shelter supervisor. Let me thank Colleen for texting me so I could find y'all. We are, I'm with Domestic Violence Services and of Cumberland and Perry County. And some of the things, we've kind of had to modify our services. So we have a 24-hour hotline, which is still that way. We are still taking calls 24 hours. And we have a 30-day emergency shelter, which we've had to modify. So new clients coming in, we are now hoteling them, but we're still providing the same services. So we're still providing food, we're still providing counseling. The counseling is now being done over the phone, and we are basically packing up food boxes and making sure that our clients have food while they're at the hotel. We also provide legal and medical advocacy and accompaniments, and our legal accompaniment has changed some in the fact that the court is restricting who can come into the courthouse. And so we are no longer at this time accompanying clients, accompanying victims to the courthouse to file their PFAs. We are filing PFAs, but we are giving it to the client and they are actually taking it into the courthouse. We are not accompanying it. We do have adult empowerment counseling. That has changed in the fact that it was done face-to-face, and right now we are doing it over the phone. We have child supportive counseling, and we're not doing that. That's on hold at this point in time, as well as our community education and prevention program with the schools closed. And then we have adult support groups. We have one adult support group, and that is suspended. We are looking into ways to be able to do that online, but we're trying to find a way to do it where we can still honor our confidentiality agreement with clients. So.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Scott, would you like to go next?
Yes, hi. Safe Harbor works very closely with all of the folks here in Cumberland County, especially domestic violence services of Cumberland and Perry counties. Our main role is we provide shelter and supportive services for homeless individuals and families. We have emergency shelter and we have permanent housing as well. Our stays are longer in the emergency shelter than domestic violence services, and we are usually the next step for someone coming from domestic violence services. We would be the next step if we have openings to take them. We also do have folks who come to us directly who have domestic violence pasts or situations that they're escaping. And so we work very closely with other nonprofit friends in the community, Marikey Mental Health Services, Sadler Health Services, UPMC, Pinnacle, many other groups to make sure that they are getting the assistance they need in dealing with their situation and their trauma. We work again closely with domestic violence services to make sure that their folks in transition well and have everything they need. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected us in a number of ways. First and foremost, we have paused intakes of new clients in our emergency shelter area because that is communal living. They share kitchen, they share bathroom, they share a living area, but have their own sleeping quarters. And so at this time, we're trying to prevent introducing any virus into our larger community. Beyond that, we have prohibited all non-essential visitors to our main facility. So unless it's a healthcare worker, mental health worker, or a caseworker, folks are not having visitors at this time. We've also had to alter how we are intaking donations. We're making arrangements for curbside pickup, no contact pickup. We are also limiting in food donations, no homemade or prepared meals at home. Commercial kitchens is fine. And certainly grab and go meals, box meals, those kind of things, we certainly do have a need for. But other than that, again, we are taking steps to limit our exposure in terms of the virus wherever we might see an opportunity so that we can hopefully ensure the health of our clients. For us, the key for working with survivors of domestic violence or people who are fleeing domestic violence is really based in what is called trauma-informed care. Understanding their past or their current situation and how that has affected them, and then making sure that not only getting them the help they need, but working with them in a way that doesn't continue to cause them harm or frighten them in any way. And that's very important. We do have a client currently who has some domestic violence, not very recent, but still has that trauma and still has basically PTSD from it from many, many years ago. And so we have to alter how we work with this person to make sure that we're able to help this person in a way that is helpful to them and does not trigger anything that would cause them further harm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Jason, would you like to go?
Sure. Jason Brode from DICON and also working with the AMEN program. Wanted to just thank everybody on the panel for doing what they do. We're all in unprecedented time right now and trying to figure all this stuff on the fly. But working with the youth that I work with, we work with both dependent and delinquent teenagers in most of our programs through the Wilderness Center at DICON. We have community-based programs as well. So we already have some ability to kind of touch on families in their homes where these youth are living and residing. And so we're trying to kind of keep track of them right now. While social distancing is going on, they're not coming out to our facility due to all the requirements that we're under. But we are touching base with them. You know, one of the things that I know is concerning with child welfare is really, you know, the last 5 years in the state of Pennsylvania, there's been a big effort to do a lot of work with mandated reporters, educating mandated reporters, making sure folks know what to report, how to report. And they're the eyes that are on a lot of our vulnerable kids, and they're not seeing those kids right now. So I know that childline calls have dropped in the past 2 weeks, and I don't think that's because stuff's not happening. It's just the mandated reporters aren't being able to see kids and talk to kids and be able to lift their concerns to childline. So I think that's something that we all should be concerned about, and something that I think as providers, we try to, you know, get our eyes on kids when we can. We're really touching base with them, letting them know we're around, we're here, we're thinking about you. The other thing that we've run into is food shortages and some food anxieties in some of the homes. A lot of the kids that we work with, you know, they're coming out 5 days a week, and we're providing breakfast and lunch for them. on a daily basis. And now they're home, and their parents are getting used to how much food they might need to have. But we also have parents who are losing jobs during shutdowns and things like that. So we have been dropping off food. We've been dropping off grocery gift cards, making sure that we're supporting in that way. We're about to launch our school program next week with the kids that do day school with us. We're working in partnership with the Capital Area Intermediate Unit to get that up and running. And again, a lot of our kids are students with education plans who need a different level of learning support. It's not real easy to I think, pull off online learning with them. So we're going to kind of be learning that on the fly, I think, and kind of seeing how we can support them and their learning needs, and still, allow them to keep up with their peers and not fall behind because, there's not schooling going on, or traditional schooling going on right now. So that's a big thing. My other hat, and one of the other things I can speak to kind of safe haven stuff is I'm a co-facilitator with the AMEND program, which is also through the Domestic Violence Agency, Carlisle and Perry counties. And the AMEND program works with perpetrators of domestic violence. And it's a weekly group. It's 26 sessions based on the Duluth model. And, we're working with men who have committed domestic violence and having them kind of consider their beliefs, the beliefs that are behind, the abuse, pushing them to be accountable, to take a look at their choices, challenge them to make changes in those beliefs so that, they're not, that they're looking for alternatives to deal with these type of situations. And I think it's a little bit concerning for us that right now, because of social distancing, we're not having group. Those groups were being held weekly, but we haven't had those for 3 weeks. It's a especially difficult time. We do have men that we know are probably vulnerable to losing their jobs, deal with stress and anxiety through some drug and alcohol use. They're losing, control of things maybe that they have no control over, I think, which makes the people in their lives pretty vulnerable to further acts of abuse. And so, one of the things that we've done is certainly been calling them and checking in with them and trying to be a resource for them, making sure they know that if they're running into difficulties, if they're looking for alternatives when they are dealing with things, that they can call us and talk through those things with us. And hopefully they'll use us as a resource before they would act out. And again, it's concerning that we're not being able to meet with them, but we don't really have an alternative to the way we do group. So that's kind of where I'm at and our agency.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So we can now begin the question and answer session. So to our viewers, just as a reminder, you can submit questions in the chat function of this live YouTube video. So feel free and don't hesitate to ask questions there. But one question I got a direct message to me that's primarily for Sonya, but anyone can pitch in as well, is do you anticipate or are you already seeing an increase in demand for your services?
We are already seeing an increase in phone calls, and we expect to see an even greater increase the longer that this lasts. As Jason said, it's really about the loss of control. Power and control is what domestic abuse is about, and this loss of control for everyone. Most people can find a healthy way to cope, and abusers can't, and so they tend to take it out on their families. So we do expect to see a greater increase, and phone calls have picked up, especially for PFA service.
Yeah, and if I can chime in quick, I would say that it is concerning too that with the stay-at-home orders, the opportunity to call and seek support in a confidential way or outside of or away from the perpetrator is not an easy thing either. And so that's a concern that, you know, that a lot of times the victims are around the perpetrators right now, and perpetrators aren't real happy to if they do call services or support. And so that's a concern for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We've seen an increase in the number of referrals coming to us through the coordinated entry 211 line that mentioned domestic violence situations. Also, obviously, if you just Google domestic violence right now, is so many articles from all over the country that everyone in the domestic violence services is seeing an increase in the need for their services, the calls they're receiving. So it's the pandemic is definitely having an effect.
It is.
Yeah, we've definitely seen an increase as well, especially as Sonya said, with our SVPOs, which are our versions of the PFAs. And a lot of our calls, actually, we end up kind of fielding back and forth, trying to help people figure out if it's more appropriate, if it is a domestic violence situation, and referring them to DVS for assistance. But because there is such a strong overlap of sexual assault very often in domestic violence, we've definitely seen an increase in calls as well. Unfortunately, we're sending them to you, Sonya, but we're glad to help anybody who contacts us to help them problem solve and figure out where they need to be.
Great, thank you, everyone. Another one that I have here is your opinion on the actions that are being taken currently by the federal government to help out in situations like this, and maybe opinions on actions you think should be taken, especially in light of what the French federal government is doing, for example. So just kind of wondering all of your thoughts on that.
Well, I can go first. I want to talk about maybe what the federal government could do. I think that we're not sure exactly how all of this thing is going to pan out whenever this money is released. And I did read about France offering to hotel people, and then the money that they're going to give to domestic abuse programs. And so, you know, I think that while we're very fortunate in this community to have agencies that will immediately step up, like United Way or Partnership for Better Health, and, you know, help us with funding and offer, you know, grants and things like that. You know, there are programs that do not have the support. And they have to make decisions about whether they're going to furlough employees, or, you know, they have to turn away people because they don't have the resources. And I think that if the federal government could consider having an emergency fund that domestic violence centers can draw from now, instead of having to wait until this money is dispersed. And then I think it would be helpful, because when you have more people in shelter, of course, your costs are going to go up. Your food costs are going to go up, your services, your transportation. We do relocation assistance for people who can find support in other areas of the nation, or even of the state that we're in. And we also do like security measures. We might change locks, we might fix doors, things like that. So when you have more people coming in, there's more increase in needs. And so, you know, the federal government could help by creating an emergency fund that domestic violence centers could draw from immediately. And then of course, there's just overall funding period. Most domestic violence programs, just like all social service programs, are understaffed and underfunded. And so, you know, after this is all over, you know, we still want to still look into how you could increase funding to these programs.
I looked at the article that was attached to that question with regard to what they're doing in France, and I think it's a great start. I think right now, unfortunately, what we will see in the United States is that there may, as the coming surge that they're predicting in COVID-19 cases comes along, there may be competition for those hotel rooms for not only domestic violence service folks, but those who are recovering and don't need to be in the hospital, but still need to be quarantined in some way. There was just an article on Penn Live today about a gentleman who was released from Geisinger Holy Spirit, felt he shouldn't have been released, but he was, because he didn't want to go home and share his home with his son, knowing that he still had COVID. So they hoteled him. And there are community cares who Sonya and I work very closely with as well. They have hoteled some folks as well. So while it's a good idea, it's a good start, and definitely something worth considering as we start to the recovery of this pandemic. During the pandemic, there might be some competition for those hotel rooms with those who are recovering from the virus as well.
I'd just like to say too, I think, domestic violence is a community responsibility and takes the community to respond, from law enforcement to everybody, to neighbors, to, public service announcements and things like that. I think it's important to just highlight the issue. It is a troubling time, and there is a lot going on, and we're hearing a lot about the virus, and we're doing the things that we need to do by social distancing and staying at home. But we also need to highlight that, sort of what you did with this forum, that, not everybody's home is a safe place, and we need to just keep track of people and make sure that we are being responsive to situations that may require law enforcement and may require support and may require PFAs, and so we keep an eye on our neighbors. And I think public service announcements like that would certainly help, I think, in this time as well. So you don't hear much about it, and I think it is important to highlight it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I saw the France article as well, and I love the ideas of thinking outside of the box of how to contact people in the community. But this also has shown us how disconnected our government really is from their citizens. So I know my hope is that this helps people really engage their local community, their resources, their legislatures, in order to help make some changes. Unfortunately, it takes something like this to happen to really show us how insufficient we are as a nation. And I appreciate everybody on the forum, what they're doing and how they're working very hard to get the word out in the community.
Well, thank you. As a follow-up question to that, what about state or county level support? What can state and local governments do to help, and maybe what are they doing and what can they do better?
I mean, I think the longer this goes on, I think the court system needs to find a way to be more responsive. I was concerned with what Sonya said about not being able to, support victims in court. I talked to a colleague of mine in Women of Need in Franklin County, and he talked about, a lot of people were kind of skipping the support services and going right to get PFAs. And that's not always an easy process for victims without guidance and support. And so I think, rules that restrict people from the domestic violence agency from being in court and supporting, I think that's not a good rule. So I think, when we felt like this was temporary, some of those things made sense, but this is going to be a longer term situation. I think we need to have a little bit, open that process up a little bit and take a look at how we can do it and still be safe. So that was one of the, locally, that's one of the things that I would like to see happen.
I think Jason pointed out a good thing, in that it's really a two-step process. The first step is the immediate need now during the pandemic. And one of the things that we heard yesterday or 2 days ago on a myriad of Zoom calls, that Cumberland County has received a good portion of additional community development block grant funding to use during this pandemic. And so part of that certainly could go to domestic violence services and other organizations to help domestic violence victims immediately in terms of dealing with the uptick in domestic violence during this pandemic. Then whenever recovery starts, we know there's going to be recovery, but when that recovery starts, now we look at, okay, what did we do during the pandemic and immediately that worked well? And we'd like to continue, and how do we figure out to continue that now during the recovery, and when we finally wherever it is down the road, get back to whatever normal looks like.
I think also that we could, there could be more money that is invested in housing when this is all over with, so that women could go into safe housing and they wouldn't have to worry about going back to the abuser or, you know, someplace where they're not familiar or stay in shelter. I think that we could, local government should look into taking some of that CDBG money and invest it into the rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing, so that we can help these families when we are able to get into a safer place with this pandemic.
Affordable housing is the key to almost everything, unfortunately and fortunately. And that goes back to the late 70s when the government was funding affordable housing and then slowly stopped. And that's where you saw the uptick in homelessness in the 80s, the resurgence of it now, especially on the West Coast, where housing costs have far exceeded what even folks at the lower part of the middle class might be able to afford. So housing is absolutely a key. And Safe Harbor knows that. And we are working on a project that hopefully, if we're able to connect all the dots correctly in a significant period of time, within the next 2 years, to get shovel in the ground to build some more affordable housing in the community. It's a long process. There's a lot of steps, but it will hopefully bring some new housing to this community. But I agree with Sonya, affordable housing is a key at all levels.
Great, thank you. Another question, this is a little bit more specific, but how are you communicating with your clients through this time? Are you using Zoom or using other methods, and do you find it useful and helpful, or is it kind of an adjustment?
So we're doing a lot with, you know, just old-fashioned phone stuff. You know, we know most of the students that we work with have phones. We're trying to get to them that way. The domestic violence clients that we work with, the men, we've been phone calling. That seems to be our best way to get in touch with them as well. We've tried some Zoom things and like that, stuff like that, but you know, we're talking about some families that don't necessarily have internet and some of those things that are required for Zoom. But we're working our way through that piece because again, you know, the Zoom and the FaceTime and stuff like that, you're being able to engage a little differently than you would with someone over the phone. So that's helpful. So we're, you know, I sort of like someone else said earlier, I think it was Sonya, you know, we're learning some technology that maybe we didn't have to before, and we're upping our game, right? So doing what we can with what we got.
We've been blessed, I guess, in that situation because all of our folks are in the shelter and we're there. So it's easy to communicate by putting out information, putting it in their doors, under their doors, getting them that information. Where our challenge has been is making sure that the community is aware of what we need and what we don't need, and using social media and other methods to make sure the community is aware that we are still operating and trying to make the best of this situation as well. I think we're doing a really, really good job, and I hope that the community is able to get the information that we're communicating.
We're using a lot of phone and email as well. We've tried to use Zoom for some counseling. We're trying to switch to a little bit better format that's actually for telehealth. But again, safety concerns a lot of times in the home too. If you're a domestic violence victim, you're not going to want to sit there and FaceTime with somebody in your living room while your family's around. So a lot of it we've been trying to work out through phone and email. And then again, as Scott said, kind of putting out stuff on social media to try to engage people, remind them we're still here. That we have limited our interactions at the hospitals. So currently we're not actually going to the hospitals for accompaniments for rape kits. We've provided all the hospitals information and we're using the phone as well. But again, with the chaos surrounding everything that's going on, especially in the hospital environment, we've been finding that very challenging.
We're using phones. I was the one that said I'm technology challenged, and so thank God we still have phones. And so our adult counselor, she's checking in with all of the people that she's counseling with. I'm checking in with the members of our support group. And as I said, we're trying to look at ways to start that back up again to keep the women as connected as possible. And we talked about Zoom too, but we think we need to look for a better format. So that's where we're at right now, but we are using phones to stay in contact.
Great, thank you. Another one I just got is, can or are victims of domestic abuse exempt from the stay-at-home order, or more details kind of on what that encompasses?
Well, if a person is in a domestic violence situation, we want them to get to a safe place, okay? And so I don't know what, I don't know what the laws are, but I would assume that the law enforcement would want them to get to a safe place too. So our shelter, like I said, we are hoteling people to make sure that they are safe. And we were told by PCADV that we can take people from other counties. We're encouraged to take other people from other counties to get them into a safe place. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure what law enforcement is saying, but we're saying if you're in an unsafe place, if you feel you're unsafe, then you need to find a place to go. And we are still sheltering. Domestic violence programs are still sheltering.
I think it's a bit of common sense for sure, that if it's a situation that is untenable and just unlivable, they should get out no matter what stay-at-home orders are out there. The other thing, in terms of the common sense, the police have said they're not looking for people who are violating an order. They're not going after people violating an order. It's the folks who may draw law enforcement's attention are those who are having large group gatherings and those kind of things. So, but absolutely, if someone feels that they're not safe where they are, they should get somewhere where they're safe.
Great. Another question is, what are some concrete ways the community can step up? How can family members, neighbors check in with people that they may be worried about in a safe way? So what are some ways that local community members can help?
Are you asking as far as recognizing domestic violence or helping? I'm not sure.
Sure. I don't know if the question had a specific use, but so it could be in that case, just kind of what the general public can do to help each of your specific organizations at a time like this.
Well, we're saying, we're in need really of gloves and masks, because when we do have someone at a hotel, we actually have to have a person go and deliver the food and any type of toiletries or basic need products that they need. So we're looking for gloves and we're looking for masks. And we also, if we have a family who is in hotel who has a transportation or has a car or a truck or whatever, but they have their own transportation, we are providing gift cards for them to be able to go and purchase food. And so we can use some help with that. We are asking the donations, please don't drop things off at the shelter. We're not looking for food donations. We're not looking for clothing donations. We are looking for gloves, masks, and gift cards. And, if someone would want to donate that type of stuff, just call the shelter and let somebody know, and someone will meet them at the door.
And again, I think I said that, people are eyes and ears in their neighborhood. And I think, I see people around, they're getting out, they're walking on nice days, they're respecting distance from other people, but it's just keeping your eyes out, it's just seeing what's going on. And, I think if there's a trouble spot, I think it's okay to call and text people that might be, and you have that relationship with, and just check in on people. I think that's what being a community is. And I've always appreciated this area for their concern for their neighbor. And I think that's what it is. It's not forgetting about your neighbor right now. it's more important now than ever to just be keeping track. And I think, again, if you have concerns, make phone calls to law enforcement and report that stuff, So that's, I think, recognizing and paying attention and, just being the eyes of your neighborhood.
Yeah, I think I second that, Jason, and just being able to communicate humanly with people. Social media I was not always a fan of, but it appears to be a really great way to connect with people and check in on your neighbors. And I would say even with many of our hotlines, they are confidential. So even if you have questions or you see something that may not be your own situation, you can always call and ask questions. We don't always have to take identifying information. We are mandated reporters. So if there's something involving a child, we will have to report that. But many of the lines that we have in the community, you can call and ask questions. If you see something, if you are worried about something, and we can even talk to you about how to work with them, maybe the specific situation, and just kind of give some general support to you to be a better friend and neighbor.
For Safe Harbor, generally, the personal care items, grab and go food items, those kind of things are what will be most helpful for our clients right now. In terms of volunteers, because we are limiting non-essential visitors from our facility, that also means that we are not allowing volunteers. But if someone has the time, has the ability, and wants to volunteer, there are two other organizations that we all work very closely with who I know have a significant need right now and would love the volunteers, and that's Community Cares and Project Share. They have significant need nearly every day, and they benefit our clients. We benefit their clients in various ways. And so, again, if you really want to help, you really want to get out and do something and help an organization, I would recommend those two organizations right now.
Thank you. I just got a question about women's health clinics and kind of details on that. So the question reads, since hospitals are busy with coronavirus efforts, are women's health clinics open for those who need them or who experience sexual abuse, or what kind of is going on that front?
Yes, so those are all still essential services. Each clinic, I believe, I can't speak to everything, but from what I know, each organization or clinic does have some sort of COVID-19 implementation they're doing right now. I know many of the UPMC clinics and the hospitals, you still go in, you can still get services. If you do go in very often to do a rape kit, they will provide medicine for STIs, Plan B, things like that. So all of those services are still up and running. I know some of them have started to do a lot of triage over the phone once you get there before, in order to kind of better figure out where you need to go, keep you out of maybe a high risk area if you don't need to come into the ER, and they can send you somewhere else. But those are all still up and running. We do work very closely with many of those organizations. So if you do find yourself not getting services or needing assistance trying to navigate those, you can always let us know, and we do have the ability to kind of get some information on the back end to try to help figure out where you need to go and what you need, what you would need help with.
Great, thank you. And I have one last question for you, for all of you. What are first steps that you can advise for someone who is suddenly finding themselves in an increasingly dangerous situation, or the first steps for someone who is feeling like they may lose control? So what can you advise? What should people do in this time?
I think I would advise someone to kind of work through a safety plan. And so that would look like, how you would get away, where, first of all, you can even, in a safety plan, you can even look at how you could de-escalate the situation. You would think that being a victim, that shouldn't be your responsibility. But if you are in a situation where you can't get out, there are things that you can do to kind of de-escalate an abuser. And so I would say create a safety plan, figure out, you know, how you can make that phone call, how you can get away, you know, where you might go, who you could call, how you could get help. But I think that that would be what I would say is one of the first steps, if you can, to create some type of a safety plan. Start thinking now about how to get safe.
Well, one of the things that we teach the men that we work with right away is something called a timeout. And I think it's, you know, when things are escalating and the men that I work with feel like they're losing control, they're dangerous. And the more that we can get them to take responsibility during those times for themselves and their decisions and choosing to be nonviolent, that's the key. And so I think it's, you know, if I was advising one of our guys that was losing control, I would say, take a time out. If you still feel like you're losing control, pick up the phone, call someone that you think is going to advise you well. You know, someone who doesn't want to see you be a violent person. You know, call our amend phone and leave us a message, get a hold of us. We'll talk you through these things. And I think that's really, you know, the advice for somebody losing control is, you know, you have the means to stay in control if you make that choice. And it's not an easy choice for our guys because I think they're very comfortable with, you know, expressing and doing and acting the way they act. But I think they, you know, the more that they don't want to be a violent person, the more that they will find the resources to, you know, take that space, take that time, and de-escalate themselves and take that responsibility. So, you know, if I was advising someone or if I was friends with someone who I knew was at risk to do those things, I would say, hey, you know, pick up the phone and call me if you're feeling like you're gonna hurt somebody that you love or you say you love, and let's talk through that. So that's what I would say for somebody who is losing control. You know, take that responsibility and you know, take that time, that space to yourself, and figure out how to not lose control and not be a violent person.
Well, yeah, and I'd say if it is safe to get out or it is safe to call, and you are blanking, I know sometimes when you get very upset, it just goes blank. So reach out to those hotlines if it is safe. You know, again, you don't always have to tell us everything. If you just call us and say, hey, my anxiety's through the roof right now. I've dealt with this. I don't know what to do. I just need somebody to talk to for a minute. That's what we're here for.
Wonderful. All right, well, that seems to be all the questions that we've gotten. So this concludes tonight's program. Contact information for these organizations and resources for Dickinson students, staff, and faculty can be found on the Clarke Forum's website or in the description of this YouTube video event. Thank you all for viewing and have a great night.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That was really fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to end the meeting. I'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Everybody hang in there. Take care.
Yeah.
You too.
Stay healthy.